Jesus picks a boat, happened to pick Peter's, deserved to be in your presence. And Jesus then talked to him about that. And then he said, and when he talked to Peter and Andrew, and he said, if you'll follow me, I will make you fishers of men, or I will make you catchers of men, or you will catch men. He was looking directly at Peter when he said that, right? Because it says in the Bible, he looked at Peter and said, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. And he left it all. And we finished up by saying how much that he left, right? You know, he left probably the greatest profit he would have ever made that night with all of those fish. He left his boat. He left the nets. He left all of those things. And we talked about the fact that Peter, that we know of, is the only one of the apostles and disciples, of these apostles certainly, that was married, right? He's the only one that talks about Peter having had a wife, and so he left her for a time. And I'm sure he came back. So what are we going to talk about? Any comments about any of that?
So like Jesus was a rabbi?
Yes.
Okay, so they have ceremonies when they finish their schooling or whatever, I'm assuming, so
They do now.
well, I mean,
I don't know what they
how
did.
would they officially become a rabbi, that somebody had said, okay, you are one, or do you think the Hebrews had a ceremony for everything?
For everything. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question,
I just wonder if Jesus probably went through that ceremony.
but I will find out. Well, so you know, we've got that from when we read in Luke, you know, when Jesus was 12 years old, right? I mean, that's the only real account. I mean, the only thing that we know what Jesus did, we know that he went to Egypt for a time, you know, because of Herod, not Herod the Tetrarch, but Herod's father, right? Not the one that we're going to talk a little bit about today. But, you know, he wanted to kill all of the firstborn that were born in Bethlehem and all of that. And so the archangel Gabriel said, arise, take this child into Egypt. So we know that, right, that he was in Egypt for a time. We know that Joseph was a carpenter. So we know that probably, but remember we talked last week that the kids from about 5 to 12 years old, boys and girls, got a scriptural education from their parents, and then some outside as well. And then at that 12 to 15, if the boys were really interested in it and had the aptitude, then they went and became a disciple of a rabbi. So, but the only thing that we know was when Jesus was 12 years old, and he was left behind, you know, by Mary and Joseph in that big train of people that they had with them, most likely, and they came back. And didn't you know that I needed to be about my Father's business? He was teaching in the synagogue. And people will say, so that's the only thing that we know. So we don't know between that 12 years old and starting his ministry when he was baptized, right, and then into the wilderness for 40 days. So we don't know what he did. One can assume some things. I know he worked as a carpenter, probably, apprenticed with his dad. So we know that. But I don't know the answer to you. As a long-winded way to say I don't know. But I can try to find out. I can find out what the ceremony was like, you know, when one went from being a disciple to being a rabbi. I can find that out. I'll bet it's completely different than the way it is right now. You know, it's a good question. Turn with me to Matthew chapter 14, starting in verse 22. And let me set a little context for you here. Starting at the beginning of Matthew chapter 14 and verse 1, we talk about Herod the Tetrarch. So, you know, this Herod had two brothers, right? And his dad's name was Herod Agrippa, I think. We can find out. But he was the Herod that was in charge, who was king, the puppet king of the Romans when Jesus was born. And then when he died, he kind of split his kingdom in three. That's why it's Herod the Tetrarch, because it was split in three, right? So Herod the Tetrarch, and he heard about Jesus and said to his servants, this is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead, right? So going back a little bit, so here's what has been happening to this point. Remember that John the Baptist, oh, by the way, yes, this struck me the other night, and it just, did y'all know that John the Baptist and Winnie the Pooh have the same middle name? Oh, come on. Y'all don't, I just think that's hilarious.
That is pure force.
It is that. It is that. Herod the Tetrarch had murdered John the Baptist. Thank you, Meredith. Thank you for laughing at that. Had murdered John the Baptist, you know, because of his of what he had said about Herodias, his brother's wife, all of those things. And when Jesus heard about that, right, when Jesus heard that his cousin, that John the Baptist had been murdered by Herod the Tetrarch, he withdrew into the wilderness for a time, but the multitudes followed him, right? And the multitudes followed him out, and he preached to them, and at the end of that time, it was getting dark. The day was ending, and they were out in the middle of nowhere. Then Jesus fed the 5,000, right? And so Jesus feeds the 5,000 just prior to what we're going to talk about. And then starting in verse 21, it says, now those had eaten were about 5,000 men besides women and children. So, you know, there's a lot of people there that they fed. Starting in verse 22. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. So now picture that. Now, in the fourth watch of the night, so the fourth watch of the night is about 3 to 6 a.m., right? And that comes from, remember, the Roman occupation of Israel at this time. And so during the night, the Roman army had divided that night up into 4 watches, you know, of each 3 hours piece. So 3 to 6 a.m. would have been the fourth watch of the night. So middle of the night, almost morning, tossed by the wind and the waves and all of that sort of thing. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. Now have you ever, you know, when you read that, it's easy to just read something and just kind of go over that for a minute. But when we're teaching pilots, and like I'm talking with like new captains, for example, and I'm giving them a scenario, and I put them in the seat, right? Put them in the seat, paint that word picture. So paint this word picture. Dark, cloudy, probably raining, wind, waves, it's dark. And here comes somebody walking on the water. Now, picture that for a minute, right? And it makes the next question make sense, right? It's just out of the blue, out of the dark, here comes a figure walking on the water. Could you imagine what that would have been like to see? Right? And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer. It is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So he said, "Come." Now listen to this. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. When he saw that when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Now, when we usually look at this passage, we tend to focus on Peter sinking and that phrase, "O you of little faith," right? And I've heard lots of lessons taught on that. Now I want to focus on something else. And I've titled this little lesson today, "Peter got out of the boat," right? I mean, think about that for a second. In that situation, right? In the middle of the night, wind tossed, a figure comes walking towards you and says, "Come," and he got out of the boat, right? He got out of the boat, right? So what do we learn from that? Now, Matthew, Mark, and John all record Jesus walking on the water, but it's only Matthew that records Peter doing so. So, okay, so what can we learn? I have 7 things that I think we can take away from this, of Peter getting out of that boat. Number 1 is keep your eyes on Jesus, right? Number 1, keep your eyes on Jesus. As long as Peter had his eyes on Jesus, he was doing great, right? As long as he could see Jesus and he was walking towards Jesus, taking those steps. It doesn't say how many steps he took, but he was taking those steps towards Jesus. As long as he had his eyes on Jesus, he was doing great. But once he took his eyes off of Jesus and he focused on his environment around him, you know, the wind toss, the darkness, whatever the case may be, as soon as he took his focus off of Jesus and started worrying about what was going on around him, he began to sink. Keep your eyes on Jesus. That's the lesson there. Any comments on that?
The rest of your points will bear it out, but we are Peter.
We are. Well, are we? Right?
Well, our faith is up and down, just like a yo-yo all the time, just like Peter's was all the time.
All the time. Any other comments?
I think that's the same thing that we have in the world today. As soon as we take our focus off of God and the Lord, we're going to fall away.
Yes. Yeah. When you.
What did he say?
Yes. I went, yes. And he went, yes.
I didn't hear what.
What Will said?
When the will,
Oh, Troy Jack. It was Troy Jack. Yeah. All right. Oh. But mine, what version do you have? Read yours. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. He saw that the wind was, mine says, New King James says, but when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. Right? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Number 2. Looking at verse 29. So he, Jesus, so he said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, so when Jesus commanded him to come, what did Peter do? That's it. He did. That's exactly it. When Jesus commanded, no matter what that was, in this case, he said, come. When Jesus commanded, Peter obeyed, right? Peter obeyed. He did exactly what Jesus told him to do. And as we go through this, looking at these lessons from Simon Peter, we'll find that that is something that Peter does all the time. It's exactly what Jesus says to do. So the lesson here is that this is what obedience looks like, right? What Jesus says for us to do, that we should do. We should just obey. Comments on that?
and remember, it's an action.
It is an action, right? It is. You have to take that step, right? Which leads us to the next point. But it's an action. When you obey, you have to do what Jesus says to do. Do this in remembrance of me, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. When Jesus says to do it. Number 3. Now this isn't, faith, what Mark was talking about, right? Let's see what y'all think about the way I wrote this. Faith is putting one foot in front of the other. Peter took that first step, right? Jesus said, come, and because of his faith in Jesus, he took that first step. And again, we don't know how many steps he took. But as long as he was stepping, right, as long as he was moving towards Jesus, he was okay. It was when he stopped moving toward Jesus that he started to sink. Faith is taking that next step, right? That's the lesson here. Don't stop walking towards Jesus. Keep taking steps towards Jesus.
And that's regardless of where you are.
Exactly.
It's not, don't stop when you're in the beginning of your journey.
Right.
Don't stop when you're at the end of your, because there is no end. Peter, again, in 1 Peter, reminds you the importance of that. 1 Peter chapter 1.
Yep.
Even though you know these things, continue to add.
Continue to add to these things, right? To these things add blank, 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 right? All of those things. So that's it, right? So this was truly, I mean, other than when Jesus said, "Come follow me," right? This is the first time that he's really displayed his faith. When he took that first step out of the water. And again, put yourself there on the water. Would love to do that. I'm going to try that. If we ever get any water out at the ranch, I'm going to.
He knew where the stones were.
You knew where the board was underneath it, right? All right, any other comments about that? Faith is putting one foot in front of the other. Number 4. Faith, let me read this real quick. Yeah. Faith unleashes, when you have that faith, faith unleashes supernatural powers. When you have that faith and you take that first step, that faith unleashes supernatural powers. Now, for Peter, in this instance, he got to experience walking on water, right? Later, he gets to experience healing the sick, casting out demons, cleansing a leper, doing all of those things, getting released from a prison by an angel. Wow, that would be cool. I mean, not the prison part, but the angel part, right? So faith releases and unleashes supernatural power. Has anybody in here experienced supernatural power? I haven't. Not that I'm aware of. So, the lesson here is we may not be experiencing supernatural power yet because of our faith, right? But if we stick with it, right, keep taking those steps, we keep our eyes on Jesus. Yes, ma'am?
I'm thinking of the scripture that says, "I can do all things through Jesus Christ who strengthens me."
Yeah.
So it does release a different kind of power.
It does, right?
It does. It gives us the
Strength and persistence and
yes,
all of those things. It absolutely does, right?
but it's not a supernatural power.
Right? But eventually, we will get to experience supernatural power, right? Resurrection from the dead. That's a pretty good one.
I think
I'll take that one.
the premise of experiencing supernatural power also boils down to our Christian perspective. If you, as somebody who is outside of Christ and is outside of the Gospels, has no education or knowing of the Bible, they're never going to understand the supernatural that we experience around us every day.
Okay.
So
I like this.
they're not going to understand that with the Word, God created the world.
Mm-hmm.
And with the Word, He created, young man, I need you to calm down. He's not going to understand that in a Word, God created a path of salvation through the sacrifice of Jesus.
Yeah.
He's not going to understand that through our faith in Jesus, we prove over and over through our actions as Christians by obeying without question, by taking that step and continuing. They're not going to know and understand that proves out everything that God planned. He's supernaturally very super.
I like it. All right. Any other comments about that? All right, number 5. Fear will sink us, right? Fear will get inside us and sink us. When Peter stepped out of that boat, and like Will said, when he saw that the wind was boisterous, that the waves were rolling, he became afraid. He became afraid. He got embroiled in what was going on around him, and he took his eyes off Jesus and he began to sink, right? So what is our lesson there?
Trust.
Say it.
Trust.
Trust. Trust in Jesus, right? What else? So that even in those, so don't let fear of whatever is going on in your life at that moment, whether you can name any number of things that is happening in people's lives that can cause you to be fearful and take your eyes off of Jesus and lose that trust in Jesus, right? Don't take your eyes off Jesus. Don't lose your trust in Jesus. In the worst of times, and we all have experienced it, will experience it, might be experiencing it now, right? Keep that trust in Jesus, and you won't sink. No. So it's like being intentional, right? It's like, no kidding, being intentional, right? That I can get caught up, my reaction to something, or even getting angry about something, right? I just a little while ago got angry about something, and I had to intentionally, right? Nope, that is not the correct reaction. I got to get back to what Sarah was saying and make a decision to turn my eyes back on Jesus, right? Any other comments about that? Yes, ma'am.
Fear paralyzes you from action.
It does. It paralyzes you. It can keep you, if it's real, you know what I mean? It can keep you from thinking. It can muddle your thoughts, right? It can scramble your brain. And even if you can't think, then sometimes you can't act when you're just frozen with fear. Now, I've never personally experienced. I'm kidding.
Well, that may be a short time, or it may be days or weeks.
Or a long, long time. It can freeze you up for a long time.
Before you overcome that fear.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes Christian brothers and sisters to knock it out of you too, right? Okay, good. All right. Number 6. A little faith is a lot better than no faith, right? So, say it again. Let me finish. I hear what you're saying. Thank you, Esther. But I hear what you're saying. But at that moment, right, a little faith was better than no faith, right? So think about the situation. So he began to sink. He got out of the boat. There's a little faith. He got out of the boat and took that first step, right? And then yes, ma'am. Yeah, I like that. Good, I like that. So, but then when he began to lose his faith, that's when he began to sink. And then that's when Jesus said, "Oh, you of little faith," right? But that little bit of faith enabled him to get out of that boat, right? And that little bit of faith helped him take the first step, Esther, right? That little faith. I agree. Because did anybody else get out of the boat? What What did the other disciples do? They were watching to see what was going to happen, right? They displayed zero faith. Kelvin.
I think he's talking about all of us as we go through life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, right? And you can go back to other things that Jesus said about faith. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, go there, and it will go. A little bit of faith, as small as a mustard seed, makes me wonder what a lot of faith we could do, right? Well, have you ever tried? Oh, yeah.
Not determined. Different times in your life, you have different levels of faith. Just like when he was in the boat to start out with, he didn't even know if that was God or if it was Jesus.
Right.
Well, if you are Jesus,
Yep.
then tell me to come out. Okay. Well, he says, I am Jesus. Okay. Now I've got some faith. I've got faith that you're who you say you are. I step out of the water, and I have this tremendous amount of faith. This real lot of faith. Step out of the water, and he steps. It doesn't say, but he walked on the water.
He did.
Walked on the water.
He knew where the rocks
So
were.
he
I'm
was
kidding.
already walking on the water.
Yeah. Yeah, he was doing it.
He was doing it. He had all the faith in the world. And then the wind blew.
Or he noticed it.
He noticed it.
I think he noticed it. Yeah, I think he noticed it.
But he noticed that. He took his foot. So it doesn't matter how large your faith is right now today.
Yep.
It can be just about.
Yep.
I believe that mountain business is bigger because my mountain,
You think it's just an illustration?
my mountains are different than your mountain.
There it is.
You know, that's the
Yeah. That's it. Thank you. I was going down that road, but you took us down there. That's awesome, right? I think it's an illustration, right? But I've tried it and it didn't work for me, so I don't have faith the size of a mustard seed, I guess. But what is your mountain, right? What is your windblown sea, right? What is causing you to sink or to flounder?
in God's time. It might take you a lifetime to move that mountain.
Right.
You want it.
The whole journey.
You want it right now.
The whole journey. It take every step you take, every time you put your eyes back on Jesus, every time. That's exactly right.
But you notice,
Because to move the mountain, you've got to do. You've got to do.
You have to do.
You have to do.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do what God said you have to do.
I sure do wish we had at least one Calvinist in here could to argue with you about that. That'd be interesting. All right. Any other comments about that? Okay. Then the last one, the last lesson we take is worship God always. So we get back, Jesus and Peter get back into the boat, and the wind ceases. And then once that happens, all of the other disciples gather. Must be a big boat, right? But they all kind of gathered around Jesus and said, truly, this is the Son of God. And they fell and they worshiped him, right?
but there's a step there where when he's sinking and he is distracted, then he goes back and asks Jesus for help.
Mm-hmm.
He comes back.
Did I not? Yes, that's exactly right. Well, actually, what Peter says is, save me. And Jesus,
When we're sinking, that's what we
that's it. And Jesus reached out his hand and saved him. Physically here, completely later, right? So, they all fell down and they worshiped Jesus. So in the midst of great trial and great tribulation, everybody worshiped Jesus, right? So what is that lesson? Anybody? What's our lesson here? Go. Always. Always, always, always worship God, no matter what is going on. Yep. Mm-hmm. Everybody hear that? I don't think anybody can hear you. But it is, no matter what's going on, no matter what's going on, at all times and in all places and in all circumstances, worship God. Praise Jesus. That's the lesson here. Any other comments? Y'all have been very talkative. I'm trying to slow down, so I didn't prepare as much as I normally do, but I do have a conclusion. Yes. Yes. Pete, go, Esther.
I think sometimes that we forget that God has a plan for all of us. It may not be our plan,
Nope.
but it's His plan.
Yep.
We need to follow His plan.
There you go. Thank you. I like it. So yes, Peter did begin to sink. He lost faith for a minute or two there. Yeah, he did begin to sink. But he got out of the boat. You know what I mean? When Jesus said, come, he got out of the boat. We have to do that too. We have to get out of the boat. We've got to get out of our little shell and take those steps towards Jesus and keep taking steps towards Jesus.
And that's what Peter was doing right here in the first part of this discipleship, following Jesus
Yep.
around.
Yep. Yeah, just like we talked about with the disciples of other rabbis. You know, he's following Jesus. You know, wherever he's going, setting up the tents, doing all of those things. Same thing here. That's what Peter and the other disciples are doing, right? Peter obeyed. Let's do the same in all things. And then last, let's keep our eyes on Jesus. Turn with me over to Hebrews chapter 12. I know y'all are going, oh, Pat and Hebrews, you know. I know. Oh,
Before I do that, I keep getting the feeling that it's never too late, no matter the circumstances that we're in. It's never too late if we just reach out and ask the Lord to save us.
right.
He will save us.
Absolutely.
And that's another lesson that I learned. It is never too late.
Never too late. Well, eventually, it might be too late. But so, but I see what you're saying, right? If you're vacillating,
Always there.
Mm-hmm.
Always there if we ask.
yes. So if you've gotten out of the boat and you're walking towards Jesus, but then you get back in the boat, get out of the boat again. It is a practice. It's a decision. Yes, absolutely.
Strong faith equals freedom. Because once you reach a certain point, you know that nothing can hurt you.
Nothing.
Ultimately.
Well, physically, yeah. But I mean, no.
We're a body. We're a soul inside of a body.
Mm-hmm.
We're not a body with a soul.
Correct. That's absolutely true.
That's
There's nothing here can hurt me. And that's when you get, yeah, you're right. That's when you get that unshakable faith, right? That's bigger than a mustard seed. Yeah. That it begins to mature when you just keep walking, you know? Hebrews chapter 12 might be my favorite verse in the Bible right now. Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus. Does anybody else have a different version? Like, anybody have an ESV? Who says? Huh? NIV says fixing our eyes on Jesus. Anybody else says fixing our eyes on Jesus? I like that better. But I like this too. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Looking unto Jesus. Any other comments? Thank you all.